27 here. Benjamin, we're still in the late 1800s. We're about 1890s at this point. President at this time is Benjamin Harrison. He's a Republican. His Secretary of State is James Blaine, and his the guy in charge of the Civil Service Commission you may have heard of before. It was Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, so the Republicans control the White House. They also control the House of Representatives, but just by a little. They had about 3 votes more than they needed to have a quorum. A quorum was at 163. Republicans had about 166 seats in the House. So they barely control the House. It's really tight. Okay, typical Gilded Age. Thomas B. Reed was the Speaker of the House. He was a Republican, and he wasn't really happy that the Democrats had so much seeming control in the House of Representatives. Even though they didn't have the majority, they still swung a lot of weight. So he sort of changes the rules a little bit, where he doesn't recognize Democratic speakers, he ignores them, he doesn't give them the opportunity to filibuster. He thinks that the party in the majority should control the House, and the others should have no say. So much for minority rights. Now, Congress has a lot of money at this point because the federal government had kept the tariffs so elevated after the Civil War that they had taken in quite a bit of money in revenue. So the problem for them, and it's a good problem to have, is what do we do with the extra money? So they decided to award pensions to Union Civil War vets. Union, not Confederate. See, they fought against us. They don't get anything. So it's just the Union soldiers that get it. They also decide that they're going to, and this is going to win them a lot of votes, because think about who the Civil War vets going to vote for. Of course, the Republicans who passed the pension, right? We're going to be loyal to that. So that's a good thing for the Republicans. Now, the Sherman-Silver Purchase Act of 1890, what that does is it allows the government to start buying up silver, because there was a lot of silver in the market because of things like Comstock Lode and other mining hits that we had had with silver. So buying this silver is going to help the miners and the farmers, okay, because it's going to put more money into, or more revenue into the market. And what people start to do is they start to take their money, because silver was sort of down in price. Gold elevates in price. So what people start to do is they start to go to the Treasury and trade in their money for gold, for actual gold. And they start stockpiling away the gold. Well, what it does is it depletes our gold revenues, or gold stockpiles, and that's not good for the country since we're on a gold standard at this point. So we see a lot of inflation in our money, and the government is going to buy 4.5 million ounces of silver every single month. That's a lot of silver, and put it into the Treasury. Representative McKinley comes along. He would be a future president, but at this point he's a member of the House of Representatives. McKinley comes along and he proposes the McKinley Tariff Bill of 1890. There's a problem with this. It's the highest peacetime tariff rate we have ever had in this country. Normally your tariffs are high during times of war in order to pay for the war. We're not at war here. The tariff is 48.4%. The Republicans are making a definitive effort to protect Northeastern manufacturers. They're going to win some votes for this one, but they're going to lose some votes as well. So Northeast manufacturing loves this. The farmers hate it. The farmers hate it because it takes those price of those goods that are domestic goods produced in the United States, and it gives the manufacturers an excuse to elevate the price on them. Because now goods coming in from overseas are subjected to this nearly 50% tariff rate. So goods from overseas cost this. We can elevate domestic goods to cost this and still be cheaper than the European goods. So we're still going to sell our stuff, but we're going to charge more for it. And that ticks off the farmers. Darn it, we don't want to pay for more of that stuff, pay more for that stuff. So the farmers take it out on the politicians in the next election. In 1890, in the congressional elections, they vote for Democrats. The Democrats are going to rule the House for those 2 years. 200 and some Democrats to like 60 some Republicans. Guess who sets the rules now? In 1892, we have a presidential election, and the Democrat is going to be former President Grover Cleveland. Remember, he had had a term, and then he goes away. Well, now he's back. So he runs as a Democrat in 1892, and the Republicans are going to stick with President Benjamin Harrison. The populists, however, are going to get in on this race. There's 3 parties involved here, so this is your third-party candidate, James B. Weaver. Now, we've never had a third-party candidate in this country be elected to the presidency, although some have won electoral votes, and Weaver's going to do that. Weaver wins 22 electoral votes in this election, which is a pretty good showing. Now, what is the populist platform? Remember, the populists are the People's Party, and their platform is the unlimited coinage of silver. So we're going to keep taking silver and making money with it, having money backed by it. Now, that money's not out into circulation yet, but we're going to keep on coining it. We're also going to have a graduated income tax. Wait a minute, you're going to tax my income? Isn't that a violation of an amendment that says that you can't come after my property without due process? That would be the 14th. And the government, they propose this. Now, obviously, they don't get elected. They can't go forward with it. But they propose a graduated income tax. Interesting. Government ownership of telegraph, telephone, and railroads, that also comes into play here. They propose that the government control all 3 of those things because they saw them as major industries at the time. They were major industries at the time, and they wanted to have the government control them. And that was a revenue-making deal to make money. In 1892, we also see the Homestead Strike, and that's going to play a pretty big part in this election as far as directing who votes for who. It happens near Homestead, Pennsylvania, which is a little town near Pittsburgh. It happens at a Carnegie steel plant. The workers get very upset because they had to take a cut in pay, and they didn't want to take a cut in pay. Who wants to take that? Can you imagine your employer saying to you, you're going to make less tomorrow than you made today? They weren't happy. So they clash with the Pinkerton Guards. The Pinkerton Guards are the #1 detective agency and guard agency in the country at the time, private guard agency. And they were hired by Carnegie Steel Plant, the managers there, to hammer down and put down this strike. So after the clash is over, 10 people are left dead and 60 wounded. It was a pretty ugly event. And this was an example of workers who are very disgruntled in this country. They're upset. They're ticked off. They don't like the conditions they're working in. They don't like the pay that they're getting. Remember, there's no minimum wage here because that law hasn't been passed yet. The populists, they hope to capitalize on this. Hey, we're the People's Party. Come join us. Vote for us in this next term in 1892. And some people do. Remember, the populists won 22 electoral votes. Now, who winds up winning the election in 1892? Well, it's Cleveland. He's back again. So he's the only president in our history so far to have been elected, gone out of office, and been elected again. So that's Cleveland. He has a lot to deal with, however, because in 1893 a depression hits, and that depression's going to last 4 years. It's also the worst economic depression of the 19th century, the 1800s. This one stinks, and he has to deal with it. Uh-oh. So, what causes depression? Ready? All together now. Over-speculation. So, what were they over-speculating in? Buildings? They were building too much stuff. Too many towns, building too much in cities, building, and it just got to the point where it depressed the real estate market. Sort of like our housing crash a few years ago. If you build too much and people aren't buying it, it's not going to work. Supply and demand, folks. Agriculture. We were so mechanized and so good at farming that we raised too much stuff. And it depressed the prices on the produce. So they couldn't sell as much as they were producing. The free silver is going to have an effect here because we were coining silver, and that's going to deflate the value of your currency. Not good. And then, of course, you have labor disorders like the one at Homestead. So that's not going to play well in the economy either. What happens during this time? 8,000 businesses fail in 6 months, and a number of people wind up out of work. Now, silver, the government issues money based on silver. Oh, this is going to play kind of hectic here for the next decade or so. Cleveland is very nervous because he feels like we have bought too much silver and the gold supplies are going to vanish because people were trading in their money for gold because gold had gone up in price because of this whole deal, supply and demand. So Cleveland wants to reverse the Sherman Silver Purchase Act so that we stop buying gold or stop buying so much silver for the market here. And that's going to really irritate a congressman from Nebraska named William Jennings Bryan. Now, William Jennings Bryan is sort of like our Henry Clay of this period. He doesn't go away. So William Jennings Bryan comes along. He's out of Congress, and he loves the idea of free silver. Okay, because this is going to help the populace, it's going to help the farmers, it's going to help the common man, and William Jennings Bryan likes that a lot. The gold standard is really in jeopardy because of everybody buying up the gold from the Treasury. We don't have enough money to back, we don't have enough gold to back all the money in circulation. And here comes J.P. Morgan. Now, J.P. Morgan gets to play the part of the hero here because he sees the country on the brink of collapse and going bankrupt, and you can't have that. Not as a businessman. You don't want your country to go bankrupt. So J.P. Morgan issues a loan to the United States and bails them out of their rough economic times.